My name is Elena Brooks, and I'm 34 years old. At my little sister's wedding, my mother shoved an apron into my chest in front of everyone and whispered through clenched teeth, "Put this on and stay in the back. When they ask who you are, tell them you're the caterer. Don't embarrass us like you always do." The daughter who wasted her grandfather's money. My brother Daniel stood right there, watching with that quiet, knowing smirk, saying nothing, because he knew the truth better than anyone. So I tied the apron. I carried trays while they laughed, while glasses clinked, while vows were exchanged under a sky so bright it felt almost cruel. I moved between tables like I didn't exist. Like I had never existed. And then the groom collapsed. Everything stopped. People froze. Someone screamed. My sister dropped to her knees beside him, shaking, crying, not knowing what to do. And I dropped the tray and ran. Because while they erased me, I never stopped becoming someone they would one day need. But to understand why I was wearing that apron, you have to understand the money. In our house in Wichita, Kansas, everyone had a role. Not assigned, not spoken. Just understood. Daniel was the golden child. Even his failures were framed as potential. Lily, my little sister, was the fragile one. Protected, softened, loved loudly. And me? I was the one who didn't need anything. At least, that's what they said. I remember being 12, standing at the kitchen sink while everyone else sat at the table. Daniel was telling a story, loud, exaggerated, full of himself. My mother laughed before the punchline even landed. Lily was half asleep in her chair. And I was washing dishes. No one asked me to. No one thanked me. It was just where I belonged. "Elena doesn't need help," my mother once told a neighbor. "She never has." It sounded like pride. It wasn't. It was a decision. The only person who ever saw me differently was my grandfather, Arthur Brooks. He was a machinist, quiet, precise, observant. The kind of man who didn't waste words, but when he spoke, you listened. He kept a blue ledger. Worn, exact, every dollar written down. "Money forgets," he told me once. "Paper doesn't." I didn't understand then. But I remembered. I always remembered. When I was 16, he died. After the funeral, we gathered in the living room. My father read what Grandpa had left behind. $50,000 for each grandchild. For education. No contracts, no lawyers. Just trust. Just family. And that's where everything went wrong. My mother stepped forward immediately. "It's simpler if I manage it," she said. "They're too young." No one argued. My father never argued. Daniel didn't care. Lily didn't understand. And I believed her. A few weeks later, I asked about the money. Not accusing, just curious. She laughed. "Since when do you worry about money?" So I dropped it. Because that's what I had been trained to do. Drop things. Questions. Needs. Myself. There's one moment I didn't understand at the time. But I do now. The night before I left for college. I was packing the car when my mother walked into the kitchen and just stood there, watching me. "You have my father's eyes," she said. Her father had abandoned her when she was 9. She wiped an already clean glass. "Let's hope that's all you got." I laughed. I thought it was nothing. Just a strange comment. But it wasn't. It was a warning. Because 2 years later, she proved exactly what she meant. I was 2 hours away when everything started to fall apart. Junior year. Pre-med. The hardest stretch of my life so far. Late nights. Early mornings. Labs that ran past midnight. Notes stacked on notes. Coffee that stopped working. I was building something no one could take from me. Or at least, that's what I believed. Back home, Daniel's gym was already failing. It had opened with noise, big banners, loud music, a packed parking lot. My mother stood at the front desk that day, smiling like it was proof of something. Proof that she had raised success. But within a year, the cracks showed. Missed payments, empty classes, equipment bought on loans he couldn't repay. By spring of 2012, it wasn't a business anymore. It was a debt. I wasn't there the night it broke him. But I can picture it perfectly. Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, hands in his hair. My father standing nearby, quiet, careful. Maybe it's time to let it go, my father probably said. Sell what you can. Start over. That would have been the reasonable answer. The honest one. But my mother didn't deal in honesty. She dealt in appearances. I am not letting this family look like a failure. Not him. Not his future. The family. The image. That's what mattered. The gym closed quietly. No announcement, no explanation. The sign came down and ended up in the garage, leaning against the wall like something no one wanted to remember. But the debt didn't disappear. It just moved. In July 2012, my mother made a decision. One that she never told me about. One that she never planned to explain. She withdrew $32,000 from my share. Everything my grandfather had left for me. Everything meant for my education. Gone. She used it to pay off Daniel's debts. To protect his name. To make sure no one would ever see him fail. And in doing that, she erased me. I didn't find out until September. I was standing in line to register for classes when the system stopped me. A red message flashed across the screen. Registration hold. Outstanding balance. I frowned and refreshed the page. Then again. Then again. Like it was a glitch. Like the system would correct itself if I just gave it a second. It didn't. I stepped out into the hallway, my hands shaking as I checked my account. The number didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Because the money was supposed to be there. It had always been there. I called my mother. No answer. I called again. Nothing. By the fourth call, she picked up. Her voice was calm. Too calm. There was never as much money as you thought, she said. I felt something drop inside my chest. Grandpa said 50,000 each. He exaggerated, she replied. You know how old men are. I stared at the wall in front of me, but I wasn't really seeing it. Because I knew something she didn't expect me to know. My grandfather didn't exaggerate. He documented. Every dollar. Every number. Every promise. You used it, I said quietly. A pause. Not long. Just enough. For your brother, she said. Not even denial. Not even shame. Just justification. He needed it. I waited. I don't know what I was waiting for. An apology. An explanation. Anything that sounded like she remembered I existed. You'll figure it out, she added. Like she always did. Like I always had. The line went silent. And in that silence, something changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just permanently. For a moment, I considered calling Aunt Margaret, my grandfather's sister, the one who kept the ledger, the one person who might actually know the truth. I even pulled up her number. My thumb hovered over the call button. Because pressing it meant something. It meant I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. It meant I was willing to expose what my mother had done. It meant turning everything into a conflict that couldn't be undone. And I already knew how that would end. In our family, there were sides. And I had never been on the winning one. So I closed my phone and chose silence. Again. That was my mistake. Because from that moment on, I wasn't just invisible anymore. I was replaceable. And the worst part? They didn't think I'd ever come back to prove them wrong. Losing the money didn't break me. What broke me was how easily they let it go. Like my future was negotiable. Like I was. For 3 days, I didn't tell anyone. I went to class, took notes, sat through lectures about cellular respiration and biochemical pathways, like my life wasn't quietly collapsing behind the scenes. At night, I ran numbers. Tuition, housing, books. What I had. What I didn't. The gap wasn't small. It was impossible. By the end of the week, reality caught up. I couldn't register for classes. I couldn't stay enrolled. I couldn't afford to keep pretending everything was fine. So I made a decision. Not dramatic, not brave. Just necessary. I walked into the financial aid office and asked a question I never thought I'd have to ask. What happens if I can't pay? The woman behind the desk didn't look surprised. She'd seen this before. Students like me, almost there, then suddenly, not. She talked me through options, payment plans, emergency aid, loans. So many loans. Numbers stacked on numbers until they didn't feel real anymore. "Do you have family support?" she asked gently. I almost laughed. "Not anymore," I said. I left that office with a partial plan. And a full understanding of one thing. No one was coming to fix this. So I did what I had always done. I adapted. I picked up a second job. Then a third. Morning shifts at a cafe before class. Evening shifts at a clinic cleaning rooms, restocking supplies, doing anything they needed just to stay close to the environment I still hoped to belong in. Sometimes I didn't sleep. Sometimes I forgot what day it was. But I kept going. And slowly, something changed. Not around me. Inside me. For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for permission. Stopped expecting fairness. Stopped believing that being quiet would keep the peace. Because there was no peace. There never had been. There was just control. And I was finally outside of it. I didn't call home again. Not after that last conversation. They didn't call me either. Not to check in. Not to ask how I was managing. Not to apologize. Months passed. Then a year. I heard things, though. Through distant relatives. Occasional messages that slipped through the cracks. Daniel had recovered. That's how they phrased it. The gym failure was reframed as a learning experience. He was already talking about new plans, new opportunities. Like nothing had happened. Like nothing had been taken. And me? I became a story they told carefully. Elena decided to do things on her own. Always said with a thin smile. Like it was my choice. By the time I graduated, I had taken on more debt than I ever wanted. But I also had something else. Something they had never expected me to build without them. Proof. I got into medical school. Not because of connections. Not because of support. But because I refused to disappear. The day I got the acceptance email, I stared at the screen for a long time. Not smiling. Not crying. Just absorbing it. Because there was no one to call. No one to tell who would understand what it had cost. So I didn't tell them. Not then. Not for a long time. Medical school was worse. Harder, longer, relentless. But by then I was different. I wasn't trying to prove anything to them anymore. I was building something for myself. Piece by piece. Shift by shift. Year by year. And eventually, I became the thing they never thought I could be. A doctor. I still remember the first time I signed my name with that title. Dr. Elena Brooks. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet. Solid. Like something no one could take away. Years passed before I saw them again. Not by choice. By invitation. A white envelope arrived in the mail. Simple, clean, formal. My sister's name on the front. Lily. Inside was a wedding invitation. Elegant. Carefully designed. Perfect. Just like everything my mother cared about. At the bottom, in handwriting I recognized immediately, was a short note. It would mean a lot if you came. No apology. No acknowledgement. No mention of the years in between. Just an expectation. Like nothing had happened. I almost didn't go. I should have not gone. But something stopped me. Not forgiveness. Not hope. Something else. Something quieter. Stronger. The same instinct that made me press on a stranger's chest years later and refuse to let him die. The same instinct that had carried me through every shift, every exam, every moment I thought I wouldn't make it. I didn't go back for them. I went back. Because I was no longer the person they thought I was. And they had no idea. I hadn't been back home in almost 6 years. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not even for the quiet, expected moments families are supposed to share. So when I stepped out of the car that morning, everything felt familiar in the worst way. The same house. The same driveway. The same silence that wasn't really silence at all, just everything left unsaid hanging in the air. Inside, nothing had changed. Not really. The walls were freshly painted, the furniture slightly rearranged. There were framed photos I hadn't seen before. Daniel smiling, Lily glowing, my parents standing proudly between them. A complete picture. A finished story. One I wasn't in. My mother saw me first. Her eyes moved over me quickly, not warmly, not coldly, just assessing. Like she was checking whether I fit. Whether I would cause a problem. "You're here," she said. Not "I'm glad you came." Not "how have you been?" Just acknowledgement. Lily rushed in a second later, pulling me into a quick hug. "You made it," she said, smiling, her voice light but careful, like she didn't know what version of me she was allowed to speak to. "I did," I replied. And that was it. No one mentioned the years. No one mentioned the silence. No one mentioned the money. Daniel appeared last. Leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, that same familiar expression on his face. Half amusement, Have something sharper. Well, he said, look who's back. I held his gaze. For the first time in my life, I didn't look away. The morning moved quickly after that. Hair, makeup, dresses, coordinators moving in and out, adjusting timelines, fixing details. Everything precise. Everything controlled. Exactly the way my mother liked it. And for a while, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe I would just sit quietly. Watch from a distance. Leave without incident. I should have known better. It happened about an hour before the ceremony. The caterers were setting up outside. Tables lined in white, glasses catching the light, everything polished and perfect. My mother called me into the kitchen. Just the two of us. She didn't waste time. She reached into a drawer and pulled something out. An apron. Plain, white, folded neatly. She pressed it into my hands. Hard. Put this on, she said. I looked down at it. Then back at her. What? Her voice dropped, sharp and controlled. We're short on staff. You can help serve. Stay in the back. I didn't move. Mom. When people ask who you are, she cut in, you tell them you're with the catering team. The words didn't hit all at once. They landed slowly. Piece by piece. Don't embarrass us, she added. Us. Not me. Never me. For a second, I almost laughed. Because it was so familiar. So perfectly aligned with everything that had ever happened. And the worst part? A small old instinct inside me whispered the same thing it always had. Just do it. Keep the peace. I looked past her. Through the doorway. At the people moving around outside. At the life she had built so carefully. At the image she was still protecting. Then I looked back at the apron in my hands. 14 years ago. I would have said no. Quietly, politely. And then done it anyway. But I wasn't that person anymore. I tied the apron. Not because she told me to. Not because I agreed. But because I understood something she didn't. This time. I wasn't disappearing. I stepped outside and took a tray from the catering table. Glasses lined up, perfect, fragile. Just like everything else here. Guests started arriving. Laughter, conversations, compliments about the setting, the decorations, the weather. No one looked twice at me. Why would they? I was exactly where my mother wanted me to be. Invisible. Daniel passed by once, close enough that only I could hear him. Guess some things don't change, he muttered. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because something had changed. He just couldn't see it yet. The ceremony began. Music played softly as Lily walked down the aisle, glowing, perfect, exactly as my mother had always imagined. I stood at the edge of it all, tray in hand. Watching. Waiting. And then, halfway through the vows, the groom swayed. At first it was subtle. A shift. A pause. Something off. Then his knees buckled. And he collapsed. Everything broke. Gasps. Screams. Chairs scraping against the ground. Lily dropping beside him, panic flooding her voice. Something's wrong. What's wrong? No one moved. Not really. They circled. They hovered. They froze. I didn't. The tray hit the ground. Glass shattered. And for the first time that day, everyone looked at me. But not as the caterer. As I ran straight into the center of everything they couldn't control. Everything became noise. Screaming, movement, panic hitting all at once, too fast for anyone to process. Lily was on her knees beside him, her hands shaking so badly she could barely touch him. "Do something, please, someone do something." But no one did. They looked at each other. At him. At the ground. Waiting. I didn't wait. By the time I reached him, I was already focused. Not on the crowd. Not on my family. Just on him. His skin was flushed, too red. Breathing shallow, irregular. His body jerking slightly, like it couldn't decide whether to shut down or fight. Heat stroke. Severe. And getting worse by the second. "Move," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. Not loud. But certain. People hesitated. Then they stepped back. Not because they understood, but because certainty sounds like authority. I dropped to my knees beside him. "Get me water, now." No response. I looked up, locking eyes with the nearest person. "You, water, cold, as much as you can carry." That did it. They ran. "Call 911, I added, already loosening his collar, checking his pulse. Fast. Too fast. Lily looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Elena, what's happening?" "He's overheating," I said quickly. "We need to cool him down now." The water came. Bottles, buckets, anything people could grab. "Pour it," I said. They hesitated again. Because ruining a wedding, ruining the perfect image, felt wrong. "Now," I repeated. And this time, they listened. Water soaked through his shirt, his jacket, the carefully chosen fabric that had mattered so much an hour ago. None of that mattered now. I supported his head, turning him slightly, making sure his airway stayed clear. "Stay with me," I murmured, not because he could hear me, but because it kept me steady. Seconds stretched. Then, a change. Subtle. But there. His breathing shifted. Less erratic. More controlled. "Good," I whispered. "That's it. Stay with me." Sirens in the distance. Closer. The crowd had gone quiet now. Completely silent. Watching. Not the groom. Me. I could feel it. Their attention shifting. Their understanding trying to catch up with what they were seeing. The paramedics rushed in, taking over with practiced efficiency. "What do we have?" one of them asked. "Male, mid-20s, I answered without thinking. "Probable heat stroke. Collapsed about 2 minutes ago. Altered consciousness, rapid pulse, shallow breathing. We've started external cooling." He looked at me, really looked this time. Then nodded. "Good call." They moved fast. Oxygen, monitoring, a stretcher ready within seconds. As they lifted him, Lily grabbed my arm. "Is he going to be okay?" I met her eyes. And for the first time that day, I softened. "He has a good chance," I said. "We got to him in time." She nodded, tears spilling over, relief breaking through the panic. The stretcher moved. The sirens faded. And just like that, the emergency was gone. But something else had taken its place. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. I stood up slowly, my hands still damp, my apron soaked and clinging to me. And turned. Every single person was staring. Not past me. Not through me. At me. My mother stood near the aisle. Frozen. Her face pale, her expression fractured. Like something she believed was unshakable had just cracked open in front of her. Daniel didn't look amused anymore. The smirk was gone, replaced by something tighter, something uncertain. And Lily. Lily was still looking at me like she didn't know who I was. A guest near the front spoke first. "Are you a doctor?" The question hung in the air. Simple. Direct. Impossible to avoid. For a moment. I said nothing. Then I reached up. Untied the apron. Let it fall into my hands. And answered. Yes. The word landed harder than anything else that day. Because it wasn't just an answer. It was the truth they had buried. Ignored. Rewritten. And now. They couldn't pretend anymore. My mother took a step forward. Elena. But I didn't look at her. Not yet. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for her to define who I was. I already knew. And now. So did everyone else. No one spoke at first. Not after I said it. Not after everything they had just watched. Yes. The word still hung in the air. Heavy. Final. I could see it in their faces, the shift. The recalculation. People replaying the last 10 minutes in their heads, trying to match what they thought they knew about me with what they had just seen. My mother stepped closer. Elena, she said again, her voice tighter now, controlled in that way I knew so well. Let's not make a scene. A scene. I almost smiled. 14 years of silence. Of being erased. Of being rewritten into something smaller, easier, more convenient. And this was the scene. I finally looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I wasn't the one who made it, I said quietly. A few people shifted nearby. Listening. Not pretending not to anymore. Her jaw tightened. This isn't the time, she said. No, I replied. It's just the first time you can't control it. That landed. I saw it. Not just on her. On Daniel. On the guests. On everyone who had only ever heard one version of me. Daniel let out a short breath, stepping forward like he could still take control of this. Okay, what is this, he said. You show up after years, play hero, and now you're, what, trying to embarrass everyone? "Oh my God," she whispered. The illusion broke. Right there. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. I reached into my bag slowly, every movement suddenly very clear in the silence, and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Blue. Faded at the edges. A few people leaned in without meaning to. "I almost didn't make that call," I said. My mother's eyes locked onto the notebook. And for the first time that day, I saw fear. "I almost let it go," I continued, "like everything else." I held it up slightly. But paper doesn't forget. Aunt Margaret had answered on the second ring. She hadn't sounded surprised to hear from me. Just ready. The ledger was exact. Every amount. Every name. Every allocation. 50,000. Each. Documented. Clear. Undeniable. "You didn't just take the money," I said, my voice steady. "You lied about it." No one moved. No one spoke. Because there was nothing left to defend. The version of me they had carried for 14 years. The one who wasted opportunities. Who didn't need help. Who chose to struggle. Was gone. And in its place was the truth. I lowered the notebook. "I didn't come here for this," I said. "And I don't need anything from you." That was the part that mattered most. Not revenge. Not apology. Freedom. I untied the apron completely and set it down on the nearest table. Carefully. Deliberately. "I just wanted you to know," I added. My mother looked at me like she was seeing someone she didn't recognize. Maybe she was. Because I wasn't the daughter she could control anymore. I turned to Lily. She looked lost. Shaken. But not blind anymore. "I'm glad he's going to be okay," I told her gently. She nodded, tears still in her eyes. And that was enough. I didn't look back as I walked away. Not at the house. Not at the guests. Not at the family that had spent years deciding who I was allowed to be. Because for the first time in my life, they didn't get to decide anymore. And that was the only thing I ever needed.